some suspicion that this was only possible with mass surveillance, like with NSA, for example. First of all, is there any truth to that? And second of all, what do you feel are the pros and cons of mass surveillance?
There is no truth to that. And then my feelings on mass surveillance.
If there was, would you tell me?
Probably not. But
yeah. I love this conversation so much. But what do you feel about given that you said child, what are the pros and cons of surveillance at a society level?
I mean, nobody wants to give up their privacy. I say no one wants to give up their privacy, but I mean, I used to have to get a search warrant to look inside your house.
Yeah.
Or I can just log onto your Facebook and you've got pictures of all inside your house and what's going on. I mean, it's not, so people like the idea of not giving up their privacy, but they do it anyways. They're giving away their freedoms all the time. They're carrying watches that gives out their heartbeat away to companies that are storing that. I mean, what's more personal than your heartbeat?
So I think people en masse really want to protect their privacy, and I would say most people don't really need to protect their privacy. But the case against mass surveillance is that if you want to criticize the government in a very difficult time, you should be able to do it. So when you need the freedom, you should have it. So when you wake up one day and realize there's something going wrong with the country I love, I want to be able to help. And one of the great things about the United States of America is there's that individual revolutionary spirit, like so that the government doesn't become too powerful. You can always protest. There's always the best of the ideal of freedom of speech. You can always say "fuck you" to the man. And I think there's a concern of direct or indirect suppression of that through mass surveillance. You might not. Is that little subtle fear that grows with time? That why bother criticizing the government? It's going to be a headache. I'm going to get a ticket every time I say something bad. That kind of thing. So it can get out of hand. The bureaucracy grows, and the freedoms slip away. Because that's the criticism, right?
I completely see your point, and I agree with it. I mean, on the other side, people criticize the government of these freedoms, but I mean, tech companies talk about destroying your privacy and controlling what you can say. I realize they're private platforms, and they can decide what's on their platform, but they're taking away your freedoms of what you can say. And we've heard some things where maybe government officials were in line with tech companies to take away some of that freedom, and I agree with you. That gets scary.
Yeah, there's something about government that feels, maybe because of the history of human civilization, maybe because tech companies are a new thing, but just knowing the history of abuses of government, there's something about government that enables the corrupting nature of power to take hold at scale more than tech companies, at least what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, we haven't had a voice like we've had until recently. I mean, anyone that has a Twitter account now can speak and become a news article. My parents didn't have that voice. If they wanted to speak out against the government or do something, they had to go to a protest or organize a protest or, do something along those lines. So, we have more of a place to put our voice out now.
Yeah, it's incredible, but that's why it hurts, and that's why you notice it when certain voices get removed. The president of the United States of America was removed from one such or all such platforms, and that hurts.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. That's insane. That's insane that we took that away. But
let's return to Silk Road and Russ Albrecht. So, how did your path with this very difficult, very fascinating case cross?
We were looking to open a case against Tor because there was a problem. All the cases were closing because of Tor. So we went on Tor and we came up with 26 different dog onions that we targeted. We were looking for nexuses to hacking because I was on a squad called CY2, and we were like the premier squad in New York that was working criminal cyber intrusions. And so, any website that was offering hackers for hire or hacking hacking tools for free, or paid services. Like now we're seeing ransomware as a paid service and phishing as a paid service. Anything that offered that. So we opened this case on I think we called it. So you have to name cases. One of the fun things in the FBI is when you start a case, you get to name it. And you would not believe how much time is spent in coming up with the name. Case goes by. I think we called this onion peeler because of the. Yeah.
So a little bit of humor, a little bit of wit, and some profundity to the language. Yeah.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to work with this for quite a lot. So
yeah, this one had the potential of being a big one, because I think Silk Road was like the 6th on the list for that case, but we all knew that was sort of the golden ring. If you could make the splash that onion site was going down, then it would probably get some publicity, and that's part of law enforcement is getting some publicity out of it that makes others think not to do it.
And we should say that Tor is the name of the project, the browser. What is the onion technology behind Tor?
Let's say you want to go to a .onion site. You'll put in the .onion you want to go to, and your computer will build communications with a Tor relay, which are all publicly available out there. But you'll encrypt it. You'll put a package around your data, and so it's encrypted, so you can't read it. It goes to that first relay. That first relay knows about you, and then knows about the next relay down the chain. And so it takes your data and then encrypts that on the outside and sends it to relay number 2. Now, relay number 2 only knows about relay number 1. It doesn't know who you are asking for this. And it goes through there, adding those layers on top, layers of encryption until it gets where it is. And then even the onion service doesn't know, except for the relay it came from, who it's talking to. And so it peels back that, gives the information, puts another layer back on. And so it's layers, like you're peeling an onion back of the different relays, and that encryption protects who the sender is and what information they're sending.
The more layers there are, the more exponentially difficult it is to decrypt it.
I mean, you get to a place where you don't have to have so many layers because it doesn't matter anymore. It's mathematically impossible to decrypt it. But the more relays you have, the slower it is. I mean, that's one of the big drawbacks on Tor is how slow it operates.
So how do you peel the onion? So what are the different methodologies for trying to get some information from a cybersecurity perspective on these operations like the Silk Road?
It's very difficult. People have come up with different techniques. There's been techniques to put out in the news media about how they do it, running like massive amounts of relays, and you're controlling those relays. I think somebody tried that once.
So there's a technical solution, and what about social engineering? What about trying to infiltrate the actual humans that are using the Silk Road and trying to get in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could see the way of doing that, and in this case, in our takedown, we used that. There was one of my partners, Jared Darrigan. He was an HSI investigator, and he had worked his way up to be a system admin on the site. So that did glean quite a bit of information because he was inside and talking to, at that time we only know it as DPR or Dread Pirate Roberts. We didn't know who that was yet, but we had that open communication. And one of the things, the technical aspects on that is there was a Jabber server that was, that's a type of communication server that was being used. And we knew that Ross had his Jabber set to Pacific time. So we had a pretty good idea what part of the country he was in.
I mean, isn't that from DPR's perspective, from Russ's perspective, isn't that clumsy?
He wasn't a big computer guy.
Do you notice that aspect of like the technical savvy of some of these guys doesn't seem to be quite? Why weren't they good at this?
Well, the real techie savvy ones we don't arrest. We don't get to them. We don't find them.
Get to them. Shout out to the techie criminals. They're probably watching this.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you were getting the low-hanging fruit. I mean, you're getting the ones that can be caught. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it. But the anonymous case, there was a guy named AV Unit. I lose sleep over him because we didn't catch him. We caught everybody else. We didn't catch him. He's good though. He pops up too once in a while on the internet, and it pisses me off.
Yeah. What's his name again?
AV Unit. That's all I know is his AV Unit.
AV Unit.
Yeah, I got a funny story about him and who people think he is.
Can we go on that brief tangent?
Sure, I love tangents.
Well, let me ask you, since he's probably he or she, do we know it's a he?
We have no idea.
Okay.
And that's another funny story about hackers, the he-she issue.
What's the funny story there?
Well, one of the guys in LulzSec was a she. It was a 17-year-old girl. And my source in the case, the guy Sabu that I arrested, and part of it, we sat side by side for 9 months and took down, the case and all that. He was convinced she was a girl, and said, and he was in love with her almost at one point. It turns out to be a 35-year-old guy living in England.
Oh, so he was convinced it was
Yes, he was absolutely
based
convinced.
on what exactly? By linguistic, human-based linguistic analysis, or what?
He, whatever, Kayla is what it was, ended up being like a modification of his sister's name. The real guy's sister's name was so good at building the backstory. All these guys, and it's funny, like these guys are part of a hacking crew. They social engineer the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
Just to build, if one of them ever gets caught, they'll convince everybody else that, they're a Brazilian, ISP owner or something like that. And that's how I'm so powerful.
Well, yeah, that social engineering aspect is part of living a life of cybercrime or cybersecurity on the offensive or defensive. So AV unit, can I ask you also just a tangent of a tangent first?
That's my favorite tangent.
Okay. Is it possible for me to have a podcast conversation with somebody who hasn't been caught yet, and because they have the conversation, they still won't be caught? And is that a good idea? Meaning, is there a safe way for a criminal to talk to me on a podcast?
I would think so. I would think that someone could, someone who has been living a double life for long enough where you think they're not a criminal.
No. They would have to admit that they would say, I am AV unit.
Oh, you would want to have a conversation with AV unit?
Yes. Is there a way? I'm just speaking from an FBI perspective, technically speaking, because so let me explain my motivation.
Sure.
I think I would like to be able to talk to people from all walks of life, and understanding criminals, understanding their mind, I think is very important. And I think there's fundamentally something different between a criminal who's still active versus one that's been caught. The mind, just from observing it, changes completely once you're caught. You have a big shift in your understanding of the world. I do have a question about the ethics of having such conversations, but first, technically, is it possible?
If I was technically advising you, I would say, first off, don't advertise it. The fewer people that you're going to tell that you're having this conversation with, the better. And yeah, you could. Are you doing it in person? Or are you doing it in
person? Would be amazing, yeah. But their face would not be shown.
Face would not be shown. Yeah, you couldn't publish the show for a while. They'd have to put a lot of trust in you that you are not going to. You're going to have to alter those tapes. I say tapes because it's old school.
It's a tape.
Exactly. I'm sure a lot of people just said that. Like, oh shit, this old guy just said tape.
I heard it VHS was in the 1800s, I think.
But yeah, you could do it. They'd have to have complete faith and trust in you that you destroy the originals after you've altered it.
What about if they don't have faith? Is there a way for them to attain security? Like for me to go through some kind of process where I meet them somewhere where...
You're not going to do it without a bag over your head. I don't know if that's the life you want to live.
I'm fine with a bag over my head. That's going to get taken out of context. But I think it's a worthy effort. It's worthy to go through the hardship of that to understand the mind of somebody. I think fundamentally conversations are a different thing than the operation of law enforcement. Understanding the mind of a criminal, I think, is really important.
I don't know if you're going to have the honest conversation that you're looking for. It may sound honest, but it may not be the truth. I found most times when I'm talking to criminals, it's lies mixed with half-truths. And you kind of, if they're good, they can keep that story going for long enough. If they're not, you kind of see the relief in them when you finally break that wall down.
That's the job of an interviewer. If the interviewer is good, then perhaps not directly, but through the gaps seeps out the truth of the human being. So not necessarily the details of how they do the operations and so on, but just who they are as a human being, what their motivations are, what their ethics are, how they see the world, what is good, what is evil. Do they see themselves as good? What do they see their motivation as? Do they have resentment? What do they think about love for the people within their small community? Do they have resentment for the government or for other nations or for other people? Do they have childhood issues that led to a different view of the world than others perhaps have? Do they have certain fetishes, like sexual and otherwise, that led to their construction of the world? They might be able to reveal some deep flaws to the cybersecurity infrastructure of our world. Not in detail, but like philosophically speaking. They might have, I know you might say it's just a narrative, but they might have a kind of ethical concern for the well-being of the world, that they're essentially attacking the weakness of the cybersecurity infrastructure because they believe ultimately that would lead to a safer world. So the attacks will reveal the weaknesses. And if they're stealing a bunch of money, that's okay, because that's going to enforce you to invest a lot more money in defending things that actually matter, nuclear warheads and all those kinds of things. I mean, I could see it, it's fascinating to explore the mind of a human being like that, because I think it will help people understand. Now, of course, it's still a person that's creating a lot of suffering in the world, which is a problem. So do you think ethically it's a good thing to do?
I know. I mean, I feel like I have a fairly high ethical bar that I have to put myself on, and I don't think I have a problem with it. I would love to listen to it.
Okay, great.
I mean, not that I'm your ethical coach here.
Yeah.
But
well, that's interesting. I mean, because I thought you would have become jaded and exhausted by the criminal mind.
It's funny. I'm fast forward in our story. I'm very good friends with Hector Monsegur, the Sabu, the guy I arrested. And he tells stories of what he did in his past. And I'm like, oh, that Hector, But then I listened to your episode with Brett Johnson, and I was like, this guy stealing money from the U.S. government and welfare fraud and all that sort of things. It just pissed me off. And I don't know why I have that differentiation in my head. I don't know why I think one's just, Hector will be Hector, and then this guy just pissed me off.
Well, you didn't feel that way about Hector until you probably met him.
Well, I didn't know Hector. I knew Sabu. So I hunted down Sabu, and I learned about Hector over those 9 months.
We'll talk about it. Sure. Let's finish with, let's return back to the tangent. Oh, one tangent up. Who's AV Unit?
I don't know.
Interesting. So he's at the core of Anonymous. He's one of the critical people in Anonymous. What is known about him?
There's what's known in public and what was known because I sat with Hector, and he was sort of like the set things up guy. So if Lulsec had like their hackers, which was Sabu and Kayla, and they had their media guy, this guy Topiary. He lived up in the northern end of England, and they had a few other guys, but AV Unit was the guy that set up infrastructure. So if you need a VPN in Brazil or something like that to pop through, one of the first things Hector told me after we arrested him is that AV Unit was a Secret Service agent, and I was like, oh shit. Just because he kind of lived that lifestyle. He'd be around for a bunch of days and then all of a sudden gone for 3 weeks. And I trying to get more out of Hector, but that early on in that relationship, I'm sure he was a little bit guarded